Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Warlock of Firetop Mountain for the Nintendo Switch. And if that strange title does sound vaguely familiar, it's probably because it was the first book in the fighting fantasy choose-your-own-adventure series back from the early 80s. And so if you are a fan of strategy games, dungeon crawlers, choose-your-own-adventure stories, or even tactical games, the Warlock of Firetop Mountain is probably an indie title you're really going to want to wishlist. Starting off with the story though, it's kind of difficult to encapsulate the story of the game because every single one of the playable characters, which there are like 24, every single one of those characters has their own unique storyline and quest. In sum total, though, as you could probably guess from the title, the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, there is both a Firetop Mountain and a Warlock atop it. And it is safe to say that most of the characters that you could choose, regardless of their motivation to go into Firetop Mountain, will potentially have a confrontation with said Warlock. But each one of the unique characters have their own unique stats, skills, and backgrounds, and their own specific motivations for going in and blazing their own trail in Firetop Mountain. Some characters might be looking to recover an heirloom, some might just be going for golden spoils, and some might be looking for a mysterious beast to catch and possibly sell. But whether you're playing as one of the initial starting 4 characters, or you've been playing for a handful of hours and you've purchased some of the later game characters with their own stories, the general gameplay will carry out the same regardless of the character's motivations. More or less, the game carries out exactly like you would expect from a choose-your-own-adventure style game, with every single move in the game, every single decision that you make, giving you just that much more of the lore to push you even further, even deeper into the story. But unlike some of the more typical choose-your-own-adventures that have their colorful scenes and their colorful stories, in the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, you're not just navigating through decision trees, you actually have confrontations and combat. And whether you find yourself caught up trying not to be eaten alive by sandworms, or just one of a dozen different trolls that you may randomly find in a room, the tactic system-based combat is both simple and really gratifying. More or less, your character's basic abilities and skills will help you pass certain skill checks just like some D&D style tabletop gaming, but other than that, you'll pretty much be relying on your character's ability to move or attack in a very small grid-based battlefield. Like a typical turn-based RPG, you'll be responsible for making your moves, whether that is indeed movement or attack or the use of a special ability, and upon completing your turn, all of the players on the board will execute their attacks and movements at the same time. And as you might expect, because enemies can also choose to attack or move, there are a couple of different ways combat can play out. Paying special attention to the enemy characters might tell you whether they're going to move or attack, and depending on the actual enemy, where that attack might land. So in many cases, you might find yourself actually attacking the space an enemy is, just to find out that they moved out of the way right before your attack landed. But if you get pretty good at predicting their moves, you can attack where they're going to be and ace an uncontested hit. But should you and the enemy attack each other, there's going to be a skill check to see who wins. And just like in tabletop role-playing, based on your own stats as well as the roll of a dice, there will be a winner and a loser for that specific attack, which also gives you a bit of motivation to try and unlock later characters, because they will potentially have much higher stats to play with. Other than that, the environment that you're navigating through in the Warlock of Firetop Mountain is not procedurally or randomly generated. And even though scenes do appear with every single step that you take, they're always going to be consistent no matter what character you're playing with. But while that automatically might seem pretty darn easy, because if you find a situation with one character, you can just find it again with the next one, that's not exactly the way the game plays out. Each character that you choose does have their own specific skill sets and their own specific backstories, as I mentioned earlier, but that also means that they will instinctively interpret different situations and different paths for themselves, meaning that each character will have its own unique style of navigation through essentially what is the exact same map. And while, of course, every single one of the playable characters don't have their own unique path all the way to the top, there is enough divergence between paths to actually make it feel like a completely new play experience. Looking at the Warlock of Firetop Mountain aesthetically, its visuals are actually pretty awesome. When I looked at the game and I heard that it was modeled after tabletop gaming and that the characters are little painted models, I was pretty immediately drawn to it. I'll be honest, I do like painting miniatures. But that also meant that I didn't really think they were going to be investing that much into the visuals. And much to my surprise, the resolution of the game was a lot higher than I expected, and the animations of the scenes coming into being as you step through the game just gives this whole aesthetic of the whole reveal just like you would get in the books as you imagine from page to page everything coming into being as you read. The music of the game too is worth note. It's pretty good, I gotta say. I thought it was one of those things that was gonna have one repetitive adventure soundtrack, but in all honesty, while the soundtrack is really adventure-y, it never gets monotonous, even playing through the game hours upon hours in a single sitting. Moving on from the story, the general mechanics, and the aesthetic appeal of the game, though, there may be a few things worth note before a player dives in, but as far as this critique section in this particular review, it's gonna be pretty light. With the beauty of the game itself, its presence, its playstyle, and just the inspired feel, there's really not much to critique as far as gameplay is concerned. Unfortunately, though, there is a bit of lag time and even certain load screens that kind of freeze. And whether this is due to the game's coding or just the processor speed of the Nintendo Switch itself, I can't really be sure, but thankfully I never actually experienced a game crash. I did have several times where load screens obviously froze, and it did take about 20 or so seconds for them to kick back into play. And while that was definitely frustrating, it was never game-breaking because the game was never actually interrupted. Another thing to consider about the Warlock of Firetop Mountain is the swath of its playable characters. There are a ton of characters, like more than I would have expected, and they all have really flavorful backgrounds. But unless you're willing to commit yourself to taking several runs with the introductory characters, you're probably not going to be unlocking any of the later characters anytime soon. Every minion that you kill gets you a soul, or maybe 2, or sometimes 3. But with late game characters costing 3, 4, or even 500 souls a piece to unlock to play through their unique storylines, I would worry that even the potential of having so many unique runs through the dungeon would possibly become laborious if playing with a late game character is really your motivation. But other than that, looking at the Warlock of Firetop Mountain as a whole, as a total experience, I gotta say I was blown away, and I really am surprised that I hadn't heard of this game before. So if you are, as I said earlier in the review, remotely interested in dungeon crawlers, tabletop gaming, strat games, tactical sims, or even old school RPGs, there's probably going to be something about the Warlock of Firetop Mountain that you're going to find yourself just really getting invested in. But anyway, that does about bring us to the end of the review of the Warlock of Firetop Mountain for the Nintendo Switch. So if you did enjoy the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. As you can see, there are thousands of indie games out there, and new and unique ones are coming out absolutely every single day. So whether it's an unforgettable gem or an easy hard pass, chances are if it's on Nintendo's eShop, you're going to find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamer, so as always, thanks for watching.